Hashtag the rise of subscription business models. Hashtag trend now. Daily Hook. The average American is currently paying for 7 subscription services and has absolutely no idea what half of them are actually charging. That is not a guess. That is a documented behavioral pattern studied by financial researchers across the country. And buried inside that single statistic is the entire reason why subscription business models have become the most powerful revenue engine in modern capitalism. Companies are not just selling products anymore. They are selling access, identity, and habit, and they are collecting billions doing it. Tease in the next 10 minutes, you will discover exactly how subscription models took over the global economy, which industries are being quietly disrupted right now, and why the companies winning this game are doing something completely counterintuitive with their pricing strategy. We will also look at the data that shows why customers almost never cancel even when they want to, and the one psychological mechanism that makes subscriptions almost impossible to compete against once they reach critical mass. Stay with this. It gets genuinely fascinating. Background subscription models are not new. That is the first thing you need to understand. Newspapers in the 18th century operated on subscriptions. Milk delivery services in the early 20th century charged weekly. Book clubs throughout the 1950s and 60s built enormous loyal audiences through monthly deliveries. The concept of paying recurring fees for ongoing value is as old as commerce itself. But something dramatically shifted around 2010. Technology lowered the barrier to entry for recurring billing infrastructure. Cloud-based payment processors made it trivially easy for any company, from a 2-person startup to a global enterprise, to charge customers on a monthly or annual cycle. And simultaneously, consumer behavior started changing in ways that made recurring payments feel completely natural. Netflix is the company most people credit with normalizing the modern subscription economy. And that credit is largely deserved. When Netflix shifted from its DVD by mail model to streaming in 2007 and began aggressively expanding its subscriber base through the early 2010s, it did not just build a business. It rewired consumer expectations. Suddenly, paying a flat monthly fee for unlimited access to a category of content felt more sensible than paying per unit. The per-transaction model started feeling inefficient. Wasteful, even. Spotify did the same thing to music. Adobe did it to software. Salesforce had already done it to enterprise business tools years earlier, pioneering what the industry now calls software as a service, or SaaS. Each of these companies proved that customers would willingly trade ownership for access as long as the value proposition was compelling and the friction to cancel felt low enough to ignore. Main content here is where the numbers become genuinely staggering. The global subscription economy grew by more than 435% over the last decade, according to data from Zuora, the subscription management platform. That is not industry growth. That is a fundamental restructuring of how commerce works. Companies in the subscription index that Zuora tracks grew revenues roughly 5 times faster than S&P 500 companies and more than 4 times faster than U.S. retail sales overall. But here is what nobody talks about when they cite those growth figures. The companies that are winning in this space are not winning primarily because of their product. They are winning because of a concept called switching cost, the invisible psychological and logistical barrier that makes canceling feel harder than staying. Once your photos are stored in a platform, once your data lives inside a tool, once your workflow is built around a service, leaving requires effort. And human beings are profoundly, almost comically, averse to effort. Amazon Prime is the clearest example of this principle operating at massive scale. Amazon does not just offer Prime members free shipping. It offers them a bundle of services: video streaming, music, reading, grocery discounts, pharmacy benefits, so interconnected that canceling Prime means losing access to a dozen different parts of your life simultaneously. Amazon engineers call this a flywheel. Behavioral economists call it a trap. Both descriptions are accurate. The subscription model also fundamentally changes how companies think about customers. In a traditional transactional business, a customer who buys once is a revenue event. In a subscription business, that same customer is a revenue stream. The metric that matters is not the sale, it is the customer lifetime value, or CLV. And companies optimizing for CLV make completely different decisions than companies optimizing for single transactions. They invest more in onboarding. They build better support. They create community. Because retaining a subscriber is almost always cheaper than acquiring a new one. Research from Harvard Business Review confirms that acquiring a new customer costs anywhere from 5 to 25 times more than retaining an existing one. That single data point explains almost every design decision inside a subscription product. Deep dive. Now let us go deeper, because the surface level story about Netflix and Spotify is not the interesting part anymore. The interesting part is what is happening in industries that nobody expected to go subscription. Consider the automotive sector. BMW made headlines and faced significant backlash when it attempted to charge a monthly subscription for heated seats in vehicles that physically contained the hardware for heated seats. The feature was already built into the car. The subscription was simply a software unlock. People were furious. And yet the underlying logic is almost certainly the future of physical product monetization. The hardware becomes the platform. The features become the subscription layer. John Deere has been doing something similar with agricultural equipment for years. Farmers who purchase John Deere tractors discover that certain precision farming features, advanced autopilot functions, and data analytics tools require ongoing subscription payments. A piece of equipment purchased outright still has capability locked behind a recurring paywall. This model, hardware plus software subscription, is now called the razor and blade model, evolved for the digital age. You sell the device at margin or even at a loss, and you monetize the relationship over time through services. Apple does not make most of its money selling iPhones anymore. It makes an enormous and growing percentage of its revenue from Apple services, the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, Apple TV Plus, Apple Fitness Plus, and Apple Arcade. In fiscal year 2023, Apple services generated over $85 billion in revenue. That is not a side business. That is a financial transformation. The B2B software world took this even further. The SaaS industry, software as a service, is now valued at over $250 billion globally and is projected to approach $700 billion by 2030. Companies like Salesforce, HubSpot, Slack, Zoom, and Notion have collectively eliminated the concept of software ownership in business contexts. Nobody buys enterprise software anymore. They rent it, indefinitely, at prices that scale with usage and team size. But here is where the analysis gets genuinely counterintuitive. Many successful subscription companies deliberately make their free tiers extremely generous. Spotify gives away enormous amounts of value for free. Notion offers individuals nearly unlimited functionality at no cost. This seems like terrible business logic until you understand the growth mechanic underneath it. Free users evangelize the product. Free users bring it into organizations. Free users eventually convert when their needs exceed free tier limits, or when their employer pays for the team plan. The free tier is not charity. It is the most efficient customer acquisition channel ever designed. Analysis. What does all of this mean for the broader economy? Several things worth understanding carefully. First, subscription models shift economic risk from companies to consumers. A company with 1 million subscribers at $10 per month has predictable, forecastable revenue. The consumer, meanwhile, carries the cognitive burden of managing dozens of micro-commitments, many of which quietly auto-renew without triggering conscious awareness. Second, the subscription economy rewards scale aggressively. Once the infrastructure exists to serve 1 million subscribers, serving 2 million costs almost nothing additional. This creates natural monopoly dynamics in digital categories. The largest player captures the most data, builds the best product, attracts more subscribers, and becomes harder to dislodge. Competition narrows over time rather than expanding.